Welcome to our new unit on westward expansion. So we are leaving behind Reconstruction for now, but remember that Reconstruction and westward expansion take place at roughly the same time period, that those 20 or 30 years following the Civil War. So history is not always linear. One thing stops and then another starts. Oftentimes there's many things going at the same time. So what we're going to look at first is reasons for westward expansion. Many people did not move west before the Civil War, and we are going to look at reasons why they decided to move west after the Civil War. But let's start with, where is the West? When we talk about the West, we are talking about this area of the United States called the Great Plains. The Great Plains is a reference to this area in these three regions: the Midwest, the Southwest, and the Rocky Mountains. So we have part of the Midwest here, then we have the Southwest here, and we have part of the Rocky Mountains over here. So you need to understand that it's part of three different regions, but we're talking about the area known as the Great Plains, and it has these states in it: Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, South Dakota, and North Dakota. So this is the western area that people are moving to at this time. So it's important to know we're not talking all the way west out here by the Pacific Ocean. We are talking going from here to here. So movement west. If you look at your compass rose, you can see we're going from east to the west. The Great Plains has many physical characteristics. It is dry, it is grassy, they experience little to no rainfall, there are frequent dust storms throughout the region, and it doesn't have any trees. It is referred to as a treeless wasteland, meaning there are no trees, nothing is there. So as you can see from this picture down here, you see a lot of grass, but it's a dry grass. It's not a desert with sand. It's grassy, but it is very dry with the low rainfall. And you can see too that it's very flat. The Great Plains are flat. And it is a treeless wasteland. There is not a tree to be seen in this picture. Now, what did people think of the West? Now that you've learned the physical characteristics, you can see why people did not move there until the late 1800s. So before the Civil War, on this side of the line here, this is what people thought of the West. There was little rainfall, frequent damaging storms, and swarms of hungry insects. These bugs called locusts would come out and eat every single one of their crops. The land was hard to farm because it had never been plowed. So a plow breaks up the soil and the earth and allows you to plant your seeds. But because this land had never before been plowed, it was extremely difficult to farm. And it was far away from civilization. At this time in the United States, the East was mostly what was populated. As you moved further and further west, there were less and less people and less resources. You have to remember, we don't have cars, no buses, no cell phones, no internet, no computers. People had to write letters, they had to walk, they had to ride horses. It took a long time to get anywhere. But after the Civil War, new technologies changed people's opinions. So this is what they thought before the Civil War, and this is what they came to believe after the Civil War. New technologies changed their opinions. Many new inventions made it easier to live on the Great Plains. Irrigation, meaning watering systems for crops, made the plains livable in the 1870s, which is right after the Civil War. So now that they can water their crops, they can plant more out there. Farmers were able, because of this irrigation, to grow food for themselves and cash crops like wheat. So a cash crop is one that you grow purely to sell for money, not to feed yourself. So wheat became their cash crop. Railroads start bringing fresh supplies out to the west. So with the invention of the railroad, you can now take many things that were before only in the east and transport them out west. And things like fruit and other fresh foods can go in a refrigerated train car. And so now people living far away can still have access to those things. Pioneers, that's a nickname for the people that moved west, liked being on their own and taking care of themselves. That's what self-sufficient means. You are taking care of yourself. But still, many people found life lonely and difficult. As you saw from the picture on the previous slide, it's very, very empty on the Great Plains. You could go miles and miles and miles and not see another person. And that took a lot longer before there were cars. After after the Civil War, there are 5 reasons people moved west, and these are known as the large reasons. So it'll help you remember. So land starts with an L, adventure starts with an A, and so on. So L-A-R-G-E, the large reasons for people who moved west. The first one is land. Opportunities for land ownership came under the Homestead Act. This law gave anyone who had $10 160 acres of free land, as long as they agreed to stay and live on it for 5 years. If you left before 5 years was up, if you found life too lonely and too difficult, and you left, you had to give your land back. But if you stayed and farmed it for 5 years, that 160 acres, which is a lot of land, was yours to keep forever. The next reason was adventure, looking for something new to do in one's life. Many of the former Civil War men, the people in the Army, went west and became cowboys. They wrangled cattle from Texas to Nebraska and took it on long trips. It was a life of adventure and excitement, and many men and women chose to do that. The railroad. This technological advance let people move like never before. They can now cross the country in less than half the time it took in a wagon. So the Transcontinental Railroad, meaning it runs across the entire United States, links east and west. And this was a project that was built in the late 1800s. So now people and materials can pass very quickly and easily from both sides of the country. Gold and silver. There's a possibility of obtaining wealth through the mining of those two precious metals. And the exodusters were former African American slaves seeking a new beginning. So they moved out of the South and they went west to farm, and they could get land under that Homestead Act as well. So if they could scrape together that $10, they could move west. So these are the many reasons why people decided to move west after the Civil War. So at the conclusion of this lesson, you should understand the physical characteristics of the Great Plains, where the Great Plains is, and why people decided to move west. And come prepared to class with that information.